I'd like to introduce our wonderful next speaker, Jessica Taylor, who's a very passionate follower of the Weston Price Foundation. I've been watching very closely the events she's been putting on in Nottingham. So if there's anybody in that part of the country, Jessica's definitely a person to make contact with. She's a practicing nutritional therapist, educator and public speaker, runs Primal Roots Nutrition Limited in Nottingham. There's a particular interest in eating, living and nutritional ketosis, fasting and the GAPS protocol for gut restoration. Jessica's most recent article, The Functional Medicine magazine, was metformin, the only option for type 2 diabetes. So without us ado, I'll hand you over to Jessica. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Hi, good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's actually a real pleasure to be following on from Sam, because obviously, as Philip mentioned, nutritional ketosis and the Weston Price diet all kind of marry together. So I'm here today for a particular reason. I'm here to talk about the gut and psychology syndrome, or as it's sometimes now known, the gut and physiology syndrome, because actually, although the focus has been to help improve and in some cases eliminate issues, psychological issues. Actually, in doing so, Dr. Natasha McBride has managed to support many physiological problems as well. So, as you can see with the quote from Hippocrates, we knew this quite a long time ago, that all diseases begin in the gut. And I think we lost that knowledge for quite a period of time, and we've had a resurgence of that knowledge, and I think that's sort of piquing a lot of people's interest at the moment. A lot of research is happening in terms of the gut microbiome, and that's really fueling current knowledge and current practice, certainly in nutritional therapy. So as Dr. Natasha McBride said here, you can see, she said we've got an absolute epidemic of GAPS at the moment, and the sufferers are growing. And I think that we've never been in a time where this statement is more poignant. So we need to do something about it, and following on from Sam there, looking at Sam's kind of dietary recommendations is a very good start. How many of you here follow or a Weston Price kind of traditional dietary regime? So quite a lot of people. And how many of you have come across GAPS? Fantastic. And how many of those people are actually following the GAPS protocol? Okay, so hopefully today I'll be able to kind of give you an idea about why this is beneficial for many people. Indeed, the Weston Price traditional dietary guidelines are, in my opinion, the premise, the basis for health and well-being. But for some of us, we need a little bit more. Particularly when we're dealing with metabolic syndrome, we need to dig a little bit deeper, and we need to try and heal some of the damage that's been done. So you hear people say things like, I eat well and I've been following Weston Price eating for a long time, why am I still not completely well? And that's really frustrating for a lot of people. And that's because actually we don't live in the same environment as we did when Price was doing his research in indigenous populations. Actually, we do live in a very toxic world, in our natural environment, as well as the processed food that we're eating. So things are different now. So we have to dig a little bit deeper and perhaps repair some of the damage. So I'm aware that many of you will have this information, but what is the GAPS diet? So the definition, it makes the connection between the gut and the brain. Okay, so it's connecting what's happening in the gut with what's actually happening in the brain and how the brain is functioning. Okay, its founder was Dr. Natasha McBride, as many of you will be aware, and it was founded in 2004, having worked with the specific carbohydrate diet. Dr. Natasha McBride had worked with hundreds of children and had helped to support and indeed alleviate certain neurological problems. She's a neurologist herself, and so she'd seen a lot of benefit from the dietary guidelines that she'd been providing. The aim of the protocol, I don't want to use the word diet because it's got quite negative connotations, but the protocol is to heal and seal the gut. That's the premise. And in healing and sealing the gut, you will support and improve psychological issues and indeed physiological issues. So that's the premise of the GAPS protocol. So let's just talk a little bit about the functions of the gut. So there's around 2 kilograms of bacteria in the gut, and we want that bacteria to be friendly bacteria, and indeed opportunistic bacteria resides there as well. It's quite dormant and quite happy unless, as the term suggests, it has an opportunity to proliferate, and we don't want it to have an opportunity to proliferate because it's not damaging to the gut if it doesn't. So that's a lot of bacteria in our gut. It provides a lot of functions. It helps to ensure that we've got a low pH, so that actually it's a very acidic environment, and consequently good bacteria can thrive and pathogenic bacteria doesn't have the opportunity to take hold and cause damage. Also, the bacteria is helping to break down the food and synthesize to create energy, so synthesize the nutrients to support our own health and well-being. So this is a really important function for the bacteria in the gut, is that it's actually helping to produce the nutrients that we need and to assimilate the nutrients from the food. So that's 2 ways of getting the fundamental building blocks that we need in order to be healthy and happy. But also it helps to neutralize heavy metals and also nitrates as well. So it's really helping to reduce the toxic load in the body as well. But also, as the really important point really is, and a lot of the research is kind of coming out now and explaining this, we're quite aware that the jury's out on this, but around 80% of our immunity actually resides within our gut. So this is a really significant point, that actually the immune cells are going to be produced through the gut, and that's really, really important point to recognise. Also, as I've mentioned, the bacteria helps us to produce energy, so it has a really hugely important function in terms of the body. Importantly, why are we concerned with the gut? How has it got into a state where it's damaged? What are some of the things that might have caused the damage to the gut and therefore cause a dysfunction in the way that the microbiome is working? Well, actually, obviously what happens is that we have damaged microvilli because of a variety of factors that have happened. So it might be that we've not had a natural birth, and therefore we've not had the bacteria given to us through that birth canal that we needed. And we might be 2 or 3 generations down that line. We may not have been breastfed, particularly if we had mothers from the 50s, 60s and 70s when breastfeeding became quite uncommon and unpopular. So we've not had that exposure from a very early age of that beneficial bacteria and that range and diverse bacteria from our mothers. And that's really, really important to start us out in life. Similarly, we're not getting the immunoglobulins from the breast milk if we're not being breastfed. So that foundation may not be there. And then what happens? Well, we're getting ill. We're getting ill for a variety of reasons, and then we're exposed to a vast array of antibiotics. And I know when I was young, antibiotics were given for a cough or a cold, and we didn't understand the detrimental effect that would have. And then we create a cascade effect where we haven't got the bacteria that we need to help fight infection, and therefore we have to have more and more antibiotics. We're also living in a toxic environment as well. We're eating processed food, and all of this is causing damage. And when we've not got the good bacteria and we've got damage, then we're allowing bad bacterium, opportunistic bacterium, and parasites to actually take over the system, potentially, okay, and cause damage. Okay, so we've not got the good bacteria, and therefore we've got damage happening in the gut. Also, then the consequence of that is that the microvilli, which are supposed to protect us, are supposed to prevent us, the microvilli within the gut are supposed to prevent us from actually absorbing undigested proteins to bad bacterium and help us to absorb nutrients, are becoming damaged. And that damage is then creating gaps within the tight junctions of the gut. And then what's happening is that we're allowing substances to enter the bloodstream that have no place to be there. So we're not getting the nutrients from the food that we should be obtaining, and yet we're getting unwanted substances, undigested proteins that are entering the bloodstream. And then what does the body do? It does what it does best. It forms an attack. The immune system is activated. And what we end up with is a very overactive immune system that's reacting to all kinds of things that it has no place to react to. It may be reacting to gluten. It may be reacting to casein. And this has then created an immune response. And then the immune system's overworked, and it doesn't really have the time to do its job effectively. So it starts to create antibodies to our own system, and then we get autoimmunity. And that may manifest in a variety of different ways, depending on the individual. So we can see how important the microbiome is to our immune system. And this is really, really fundamental to the GAPS diet. So I've mentioned really the sorts of things that can cause issue, as well as the initial stages of our lives and antibiotics. Most of us women have been using the pill for quite a long time, and that's having a very detrimental effect to our microbiome. Most of us take over-the-counter medication, or certainly have done until we've kind of woken up to the reality of how damaging that can be, and that again is having a detrimental effect to the microbiome. So it's an onslaught. And then of course our diets, present company no doubt accepted, but our diets of processed food, certainly of years of processed food before we realised the damage it was doing, has had an effect on the microbiome. So for many of us, we need to take action. And so I believe, as I'm sure many of us do, that the Weston Price way of eating traditional foods and a traditional diet is at the heart of the way that we should be leading our lives. But for some people, it's not enough. For some people, they need to heal before they can then eat traditional diets like we have been doing for thousands of years. So we want to be able to eat Weston Price, but we need to put something in place to heal us first. And that is the premise of the GAPS diet, to heal and seal the gut. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the GAPS diet looks like, because I think it's important to know what it looks like, but also to know why. So the aim of the GAPS diet is to heal and seal the gut. So to heal by removing the toxicity and removing challenging foods, and to seal by increasing foods that heal the gut. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about what some of those foods look like. Okay, so I want to talk to you about what this looks like, and also just give you a little bit of an idea about why as well. So the foods to avoid, there is an alignment between what Sam was talking about in terms of carbohydrates here, but I just want to tell you why these foods are to be avoided. And just to give you a bit of an overview of what the GAPS diet looks like as well, because the GAPS diet and following the GAPS protocol may be different for everybody. Okay, so some people successfully manage to heal and seal within 6 months. For other people, they do it for a lot longer. And everybody's different. And what I really like about the GAPS protocol is that it allows you to tune into your body in a way that I think we've lost the ability to do, because what you're actually doing is going through a process, and it's quite a strategic process. And certainly with the GAPS diet, if you follow the introduction diet, which I'm not going to talk about today because it's quite complicated, but you can go onto the GAPS.me website and it'll talk you through it. But if you follow the introduction diet, then actually you're going through a process, not of elimination, which is what a lot of us talk about, eliminating, actually a process of starting again and increasing foods and monitoring the way that those foods make you feel and tuning into your body. And I think a lot of us have lost that innate ability. I'm going to talk to you about the full GAPS diet, which some people will take on and use for up to 2 years and find that that's enough of a time to heal. But within that 2-year gap, you might decide, and indeed Dr. Natasha McBride will encourage you to try the introduction diet, because then you can really understand what food you're reacting to, because everybody's different. So we should be avoiding all grains. Grains can be difficult to digest. I know that most of us here will be soaking and fermenting our grains, which is the best way of preparing them. But even then, those grains have phytic acid to protect the grain, and that can be very damaging and very toxic to the body. They're polysaccharides, so they're difficult to break down for many GAPS people. So all grains are removed. Similarly with starchy vegetables, so potatoes and even sweet potatoes, again, can be quite difficult to break down and can cause symptoms in a GAPS patient. So they're to be removed. Sugar, we could talk for hours about sugar, so I won't. There are lots and lots of reasons to avoid sugar completely, forever, but I won't talk about that now. But certainly on the GAPS diet, sugar should be avoided. It's difficult to break down, it has an inflammatory response, and it prevents the immune system from doing its job, okay? So sugar should be removed, and that includes, obviously, milk as well, because of lactose. Starchy beans, including soy, can be incredibly difficult to digest, break down for people, even after soaking, even after fermenting. So these should also be avoided for the period that you're following the GAPS protocol. Obviously, all processed food. Processed food is unknown to us. We don't know what it's doing to our body. There are studies out there that show evidence, animal studies predominantly, on the toxic effect of processed foods. But we're 3 generations in now, and I think we can see some of the damage that's happening because of processed foods, and all food additives as well. So they're the foods to avoid during the GAPS protocol. That's not saying that these foods aren't healthy. It's saying that what you're trying to do is heal the gut. Okay, so when you remove these, it prevents the inflammatory response that is constantly boycotting your ability to heal and feel well. Foods to enjoy, and these should be enjoyed in abundance. All fatty meats, fresh or frozen. I must put the caveat in here to grass-fed, ideally, because obviously the way that meat is processed versus meat that's eaten as it should be, or animals that are eaten on the grass, on the land, completely different. Completely different. We talk a lot about omega-3s and how important omega-3s are, and how important it is to eat a lot of fish. Well, actually, if you've got a grass-fed animal, you'll be having your omega-3s. So actually, it's important to note, where you're getting your meat from. Fish, wild, farmed fish, is problematic. The antibiotics that are used, the hormones that are used, similarly with the meat. Organ meats are a perfect food, and they should be enjoyed. You can get an abundance of all vitamins and minerals from organ meats, so they should be reintroduced onto the plate as quickly as possible. Good quality eggs. Know where you're getting your eggs from, that's really important. Non-starchy vegetables should be enjoyed. We mentioned greens, as many greens as possible. Fill your plate with lots of greens, and of course lots of good grass-fed butter as well. All fruit, but the fruit should be ripe, because again it's difficult to digest if fruit is not ripe, is not ripened. And then soaked nuts and seeds. Again, with some of these, it's a case of suck it and see, because everybody's different. Seeds and nuts can be quite challenging to digest. So they are recommended on the GAPS protocol, but again, if you follow the introduction diet, you'll learn quite quickly what foods you're reacting to and what foods you're not. Fermented foods, vegetable and dairy, really, really important, because that's where we're reinforcing the microbiome, so we're getting our good bacteria from the fermented dairy products. Again, dairy is challenging for some people, so again, it's suck it and see. It's test it, try it, go through the process and see, find out how you're reacting. And also cold extracted honey is recommended on the GAPS protocol. Some people kind of question that because of its glycemic effect. And I again would say with honey, enjoy it if you need to have something sweet. Personally, I wouldn't be putting the honey in there, although, there's a lot of nutrients in honey, but you've got to offset it with the effect it's having on your insulin response. So, good quality meat and fish stocks. This is the foundation of the SEAL part of the GUTS protocol. You're trying to rebuild the wall. You're trying to heal the gut lining. And you're going to do that by enjoying stocks and soups and stews and the jellies from the meat, which provide you with the glutamic acid that you so need. You need the gelatin in order to build the gut back up, to repair and heal the gut, to reduce the gaps between the tight junctions. So that is the foundation of the GAPS protocol. That's really, really important. Enjoying the full spectrum of the meat. Okay, so not buying a chicken breast without the healthy fat. Actually having a joint of meat and enjoying all of that joint of meat. Bones, cartilage, so important. Getting back in touch with the way that we've been eating for a long time and the knowledge that we've forgotten. So that's kind of, as Weston Price advocated. Fermented foods are really, really important. Fermenting your vegetables. If you don't have dairy, there's a whole array of vegetables that you can ferment, not just sauerkraut, but also any vegetable. You can ferment any vegetable, and it will provide you with the good bacteria that you need. If you can tolerate dairy, for some in the later stages, then kefir and yogurt as well. But you can also make coconut kefir, coconut yogurt, and that's very healthy as well. And obviously then things like ginger ale, kvass, beetroot, made from fermented beetroot, and kombucha as well, made from the SCOBY. So there's lots of options, and it really is a very rich and vibrant protocol, and you won't feel deprived. Really important, and I know that Robert's going to talk shortly about fats, but really important to have your animal fats back in the diet in abundance. Butter and ghee from grass-fed animals, coconut oil, cold-pressed virgin olive oil, obviously not to cook with because it's not saturated, but I'll leave that detailed explanation for later. Sample menu would look something like this. And the recommendation from Dr. Natasha McBride is that you go through the introduction diet at some point. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that now because it is quite complicated, but you can buy the GAPS book and it will become your guide. But also all the information that you need about all of the stages that you can see that I'm not going to talk about today, all of those are also on the GAPS.me website, which I'll present to you shortly. The introduction diet is very individual and it's very personal and it feels like a personal journey and you learn a lot about yourself. And I think that's the really important premise. So, in summary, really, you need to start to get back in tune with your body. The GAPS protocol is a way to support the healing process and then enable you to then move on to eating in a healthy Weston Price, potentially low carbohydrate diet for the rest of your life. Feel happy and vibrant. Enjoy optimal health, which is what we were designed to do.
We'll do a round of applause then.